3 in the morning. London is asleep. The fourth floor of the UBS building is a cathedral of glass and steel, completely silent, except for the low hum of servers. In the center of this empty floor sits Kweku Adoboli. He is 23 years old. He is staring at a computer screen that is glowing with a number so large, it stops making sense. -$2.3 billion. The cursor blinks on an empty email draft. It is the loudest sound in his head. This is not the scene of a grand heist. There are no getaway cars waiting in the alley. There are no offshore accounts filled with stolen cash. The money is simply gone, evaporated into the digital ether of the global market. And the man who lost it is not a criminal mastermind. He is just a kid who forgot how to fail. In a few hours, the sun will rise, the markets will open, and a $6 billion bank will be brought to its knees. But right now, in the quiet dark, Kweku has to type the words that will end his life as he knows it. He takes a breath. His fingers touch the keys. I take full responsibility for my actions. How does a single intern burn down a mountain of gold? You do not lose $2.3 billion overnight. You lose it one keystroke at a time. This is the final act. At UBS, you do not get fired for losing money. You get fired for being boring. And Kweku was anything but boring. Let us go back to the beginning, before the handcuffs, before the deportation. Kweku was a golden boy, a private school education, sharp, articulate, and fiercely driven. He landed a spot on the prestigious Delta One desk. This was not your average retail banking. Delta One was the engine room of UBS, the place where complex algorithmic trades moved millions of dollars in fractions of a second. The pressure in that room was a physical weight. You could feel it in your chest the moment you walked through the door. You were expected to be perfect. You were expected to win. Kweku wanted to win. He wanted to belong. The traders around him were gods of the modern age, shouting orders, making split-second decisions that shifted the wealth of nations. He watched them. He learned. And soon, he started making his own trades. Small ones at first. But the market is a cruel teacher. It rewards arrogance with sudden, brutal corrections. One afternoon, a trade went south. Not a catastrophic loss, but enough to dent his reputation. Enough to make his stomach drop. In a normal world, you report the loss, take the reprimand, and move on. But on the Delta One desk, admitting failure felt like a death sentence. So Kweku found a workaround. He discovered a blind spot in the bank compliance system. A tiny gap between when a trade was executed and when it was reconciled by the back office. It was a glitch in the matrix. He created a fictitious trade to balance the books temporarily. He called it the umbrella. The umbrella was never meant to be permanent. It was just a way to buy time. A way to hold the rain off until he could make the money back. And the terrifying part is, it worked. He made the money back. He closed the umbrella, and nobody noticed. The system did not catch the lie. The risk management algorithms did not flag the anomaly. For a brief moment, Kweku felt a rush of absolute control. He had beaten the market, and he had outsmarted the machine. That was the first drop of poison, the realization that the rules were not absolute. They were just suggestions for people who did not know how to bend them. Over the next 3 years, the umbrella became his shadow. Whenever the desk took a hit, Kweku would open it. He would generate phantom trades, ghost transactions that existed nowhere but on his computer screen, smoothing out the volatility. He was hailed as a genius, a prodigy who could navigate the chaotic markets with a steady hand. The bonuses rolled in. The praise showered down from the upper management. They loved him. They promoted him. They never asked how he did it, because in the world of high finance, no one questions a winning streak. As long as the numbers on the screen were green at the end of the day, the compliance officers stayed away. But building a career on phantom trades is like building a house over a sinkhole. The ground feels solid until the exact moment it collapses. Kweku did not spend the money on himself. There were no yachts, no private jets, no secret mansions in the Caribbean. He lived in a rented flat. He rode the tube to work. The phantom trades were not designed to enrich him personally. They were designed to protect the desk, to protect his colleagues. He thought he was shielding his team from the brutal swings of the market economy. He saw himself as the caretaker of their success. But that is the lie we tell ourselves when we are too afraid to face reality. The truth was, Kweku was terrified of disappointing the very system that was slowly crushing him. Every night, he would stay late, long after the senior traders had gone to the pubs in Mayfair. He would sit alone in the fluorescent glare of the office, moving millions of dollars in imaginary positions to balance the real-world losses. It became a second full-time job, a stressful, mind-numbing routine of covering tracks. The anxiety began to manifest physically. He stopped sleeping. He lost weight. He drank coffee until his hands shook, staring at the Bloomberg terminals until the numbers blurred into a meaningless stream of data. The umbrella was growing heavier. What started as a few $100,000 in hidden losses soon ballooned into the millions, then tens of millions. The larger the hole became, the more aggressively he had to trade to try and fill it. It was the classic gambler's trap, disguised as sophisticated investment banking. He was doubling down, over and over, hoping for that one massive swing in the market that would wipe the slate clean. But the market does not care about your slate. The market does not care about your umbrella. The summer of 2011 arrived with a vengeance. The European sovereign debt crisis was tearing through the financial sector like a wildfire. Greece was on the verge of default. Markets were panicking. Volatility was completely off the charts. For a normal trader, this was a time to pull back, minimize risk, and weather the storm. For Kweku, it was an absolute nightmare. The umbrella he had built was designed for light rain, not a Category 5 hurricane. He had taken massive positions, betting that the markets would eventually stabilize. He was wrong. Every time the market dropped, the hidden losses multiplied exponentially. The numbers stopped feeling like actual money. They became abstract concepts, just pixels on a screen. But those pixels were bleeding red, and the hemorrhage was accelerating. He was now hiding hundreds of millions of dollars in losses. The phantom trades required to mask this deficit became increasingly complex and incredibly fragile. He was spinning plates on a tightrope, entirely blindfolded. To understand how a young man pulls this off, you have to understand the architecture of the modern banking system. It is not a single, omniscient entity. It is a fragmented labyrinth of different departments, archaic software, and simple human error. Kweku exploited the settlement process. He booked forward settling exchange-traded funds. These trades would not require cash settlement for days, sometimes weeks. In the meantime, they generated a fictitious profit in the system, perfectly offsetting his real losses. When the settlement date approached, he would simply cancel the trade and roll it over into a new one. It was a digital Ponzi scheme, played out within the secure walls of his own employer. And it worked because the back office relied on the front office to verify the trades. He was auditing his own lies. The isolation during this period was absolute. He was surrounded by hundreds of people every single day. He sat shoulder to shoulder with his colleagues. They went to lunch together. They joked about the daily stress. But Kweku was living in a parallel universe. He could not tell his girlfriend why he would wake up in a cold sweat at 4 in the morning. He could not tell his boss why he refused to take a vacation. If he stepped away from his desk for even a few days, the phantom trades would expire. The umbrella would immediately collapse, and the entire illusion would shatter. He was a prisoner, chained to his workstation by his own design. The physical toll was devastating. He was exhausted down to his bones. The charismatic, energetic golden boy had faded into a silent ghost, haunting the trading floor long after everyone else had gone home. By the summer of 2012, the game was up. The hole had grown so large, it had its own gravitational pull. Negative $2.3 billion. A sum so vast it exceeds the gross domestic product of some small nations. The sheer volume of phantom trades required to hide it was finally causing the system to strain under the weight. The compliance department, previously asleep at the wheel, started noticing minor discrepancies. Routine inquiries turned into pointed questions. They wanted details on specific trades. They wanted to understand the counterparty risks. The emails from back-office accountants started piling up in his inbox, asking for clarifications that he could no longer invent. The walls were closing in fast. Every phone call made his heart race. Every time a manager walked past his desk, he braced for the impact. He knew it was over. He had run out of road. He had run out of time. September the 14th. The internal accountants sent the final, fatal email. They were no longer asking politely. They demanded the raw settlement data by morning. No more excuses. No more delays. The back office had finally cornered the ghost in the machine. Kweku sat in his chair. The sprawling trading floor was completely empty. Hundreds of empty chairs. Rows upon rows of dead monitors. The silence was deafening. He looked at the master screen. Negative $2.3 billion. He did not open the umbrella. He did not try to structure another complex, desperate lie. The sheer physical energy required to keep the illusion alive was simply gone. He was running on empty. He opened his email client. The white background of the new message window illuminated his face in the dark room. He typed the address of his manager. He typed the address of the head accountant. The cursor blinked. A steady, rhythmic pulse. He began to type. It took him exactly 10 minutes to summarize a 3-year descent into total madness. He explained the phantom trades in clinical, detached detail. He explained the mechanics of the umbrella. He wrote that the trades were not real. He wrote the words, "I take full responsibility for my actions." He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not make excuses. He just stated the facts of his own execution. He looked at the screen for a long time. This was the precipice. On one side, the agonizing, exhausting lie he had been living. On the other side, total destruction. He moved the mouse over the send button. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. A lifetime of ambition, an elite education, the pride of his family, all hanging by a thread. He clicked the mouse. The email vanished into the outbox. It was done. Suddenly, the crushing, suffocating weight that had been resting on his chest for 3 long years lifted entirely. It was replaced by a cold, absolute certainty. The worst had finally happened. His life as a trader was over. He walked out of the UBS building. He stepped into the cool, damp London air. He walked through the quiet streets, knowing that in a few hours, the city would wake up to a firestorm he had started. He went home, sat on his couch, and waited for the police to kick down his door. The fallout was apocalyptic. When the sun came up and the management opened their emails, the bank descended into pure, unadulterated panic. Senior executives stared at their screens in absolute disbelief. The numbers were too large to comprehend. A single 23-year-old intern turned trader had wiped out an entire year of profits for the global investment banking division. The trading floor became a war zone. Risk managers were screaming. Lawyers were scrambling. The bank had to rapidly unwind Kweku's massive, toxic positions in a market that was already highly volatile. They lost millions more just trying to close the bleeding wounds he had left behind. The CEO of UBS, a man at the pinnacle of global finance, eventually had to resign in disgrace. The compliance officers and risk managers, who failed to catch the glaring red flags, quietly packed their desks and vanished. But the banking system itself survived. The machine always survives. It just sweeps out the broken cogs and replaces them with new ones. Kweku Adoboli was arrested. He stood trial at Southwark Crown Court. The prosecution painted him as a rogue, a greedy gambler who played fast and loose with the bank's money for his own ego. His defense argued that he was a product of a toxic culture, a young man pressured to generate impossible returns by a bank that deliberately turned a blind eye to his methods as long as he was making a profit. The jury listened. They deliberated, and they found him guilty of fraud. He was sentenced to 7 years in a maximum security prison. He went from executing million-dollar trades to sitting in a concrete cell. He was no longer the golden boy of the Delta One desk. He was a cautionary tale, a convenient scapegoat for an entire industry that demanded magical returns and punished honesty. But the true, devastating final act came years later, after his release from prison, despite having lived in the United Kingdom since he was 12 years old. Despite having his friends, his entire adult life, and his history deeply rooted in British soil, the government deemed him a foreign criminal. They revoked his visa. He fought it in court, pleading to stay in the only home he knew. He lost. He was placed on a commercial flight and deported to Ghana, exiled to a country he had not lived in since he was a child, banished forever from the world he once thought he had conquered. Kweku Adoboli never set out to be a criminal mastermind. He was a product of an environment where admitting failure was treated as a fatal weakness. He tried to protect his team. He tried to please the system. And in the end, the system simply erased him. It ground him down, extracted the blame, and discarded the remains, leaving nothing but silence. This is the final act.